I had built my life like a fortress, with walls of routine and a moat of quiet solitude. My graphic design work was done from a spare room in my apartment, a sterile space of gray and white where the only sound was the click of my mouse and the low hum of the computer. Order was my armor. Predictability was my shield. Every Tuesday night, however, I allowed for a single, controlled breach in my defenses, the recreational basketball league at the community center. It was there I saw Marcus. Marcus was not a part of my ordered world. He was a masterpiece in a museum I was only allowed to visit once a week. He was an architect, and it showed in the way he moved, with a sense of structure and solid intention. He was tall, with shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of his world with an easy grace. When he spoke, his voice was a low, calm rumble, like distant thunder that promised rain but never threatened a storm. It was a sound that, for reasons I couldn't articulate, settled the frantic hummingbird of my own anxiety. He existed behind a pane of thick, shatterproof glass. He was, to my knowledge, straight. There was a casual way he mentioned weekends spent with a woman named Sarah, a way he talked about settling down that felt like it belonged to a completely different universe than my own. He was friendly, of course, in that easy, unassuming way that confident men often are. He'd clap me on the shoulder after a good play, a brief, searing brand of warmth that I would analyze for days. He'd offer a simple, "Nice shot, Leo," and my heart would perform a clumsy, frantic gymnastic routine in my chest. He was unattainable, a fixed point in my sky, beautiful to observe but impossible to reach. So I admired him from a distance, from across the polished wood of the court. I cataloged the details of him the way a historian might study an artifact, the way his dark hair curled with sweat at his temples, the focused line of his jaw when he was lining up a free throw, the scent of him that lingered in the locker room after he'd gone, something clean and sharp, like cedar and Irish spring soap. These were my secret treasures, hoarded in the quiet vaults of my mind. I told myself it was enough. To watch, to admire, to exist in the same space for 2 hours a week. It was a safe, manageable ache, a longing I could control. I had convinced myself that this was all I needed, that the walls I had built were for my own protection, and that a man like Marcus was precisely the kind of beautiful chaos they were designed to keep out. The disruption, when it came, was not a gentle tremor but a seismic shock that cracked my fortress walls down to their foundations. It was late in the fourth quarter of a meaningless game in late October. The air in the gym was thick with the smell of sweat and rubber soles. Rain was lashing against the high windows, a relentless drumming that matched the frantic pace of the game. We were down by 1 point with 10 seconds on the clock. The ball was in Marcus's hands. He moved with his usual fluid confidence, a blur of blue jersey and powerful limbs. He drove toward the basket, and for a moment, he was suspended in the air, a perfect silhouette against the fluorescent lights. Then he came down. He landed wrong. The sound was not a loud crack, but a sickening, soft pop that was somehow worse. It was a sound that cut through the noise of the game, a sound of something vital giving way. He crumpled to the floor, his face a mask of white-hot pain. The game stopped. Everyone crowded around, a flurry of concerned voices and useless advice. I hung back at the edge of the circle, my own breath caught tight in my chest. It felt wrong to see him like that, to see that solid, unshakable presence brought so low. The museum piece had fallen from its pedestal, and now it was just a man, broken and in pain on the floor. Our coach, a retired gym teacher named Henderson, helped him hobble off the court. The game ended anticlimactically. We lost. Nobody cared. In the locker room, the mood was subdued. One by one, the other guys filtered out, offering Marcus a sympathetic pat on the back and wishes for a speedy recovery. He was sitting on the bench, his face still pale, his ankle already swelling to a grotesque size. It was a bad sprain, maybe worse. Soon, it was just the two of us left in the quiet, humid space. The only sounds were the drip of a shower head and the relentless rain outside. I was packing my bag, my movements slow and deliberate, my mind racing. I should just go. I should offer a platitude and escape back to my fortress. But I couldn't. I couldn't leave him there. "Do you need a ride?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. They felt loud and clumsy in the silence. Marcus looked up, and his eyes, usually so calm and clear, were clouded with pain. He tried for a smile, but it was a weak, strained thing. My truck's a manual. I don't think I can work the clutch. He gestured vaguely at his swollen ankle. I was going to call a cab, but he trailed off, looking exhausted. It's no problem, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally high. I can take you. You sure, Leo? I live on the other side of town. I was not sure. I was the furthest thing from sure. Every instinct was screaming at me to retreat, to rebuild my walls. But the sight of him, so vulnerable and grounded, overrode everything. I'm sure, I said, and the words felt like a vow. The world tilted on its axis. The carefully drawn lines of my life, the observer and the observed, the admirer and the admired, were suddenly, terrifyingly blurred. I was walking through the shattered glass of the museum display, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. The drive to his apartment was a study in tension. The space inside my small, meticulously clean car, a space that was usually an extension of my own solitude, was now filled with him. It was filled with his sighs, his scent of soap and rain-dampened cotton, and the low, pained sounds he made every time we went over a bump. I was hyper-aware of everything. The few inches of space between my arm on the gearshift and his leg. The way his broad shoulders seemed to shrink the entire passenger side of the car. The sound of his quiet, steady breathing, punctuated by occasional sharp intakes of breath. I kept my eyes glued to the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The windshield wipers beat a frantic, hypnotic rhythm against the downpour. My internal monologue, usually a steady stream of anxieties, was now a roaring flood. What was I doing? I was a graphic designer who organized his bookshelf by color and ate the same lunch 3 times a week. He was an architect who built things, solid, real things, and probably dated women who were as effortlessly cool and confident as he was. We were 2 different species. His apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building with no elevator. When I saw the stairs, a fresh wave of panic washed over me. I can make it, he said, his voice tight with a stubbornness I recognized from the court. He tried to put weight on his injured foot and almost collapsed. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm to steady him without thinking. The contact was electric. His arm was solid muscle beneath his sweatshirt, and a wave of heat radiated from him, chasing away the autumn chill. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Let's not do that. I looped his arm over my shoulders, my own arm snaking around his waist to support him. Ready? He nodded, his jaw tight. His weight leaned against me, solid and real. It was an intimacy so sudden and profound it stole the air from my lungs. Every step up those creaking wooden stairs was an eternity. I could feel the warmth of his body seeping into my side, could smell the faint scent of his shampoo, something like sandalwood. I was acutely aware of the rise and fall of his chest with every ragged breath he took. My carefully constructed walls were not just cracked, they were dust. His apartment was the complete opposite of mine. Where my place was cool tones and empty space, his was warm, cluttered, and alive. The main room was filled with books stacked on the floor, blueprints spread across a massive wooden drafting table, and the rich, comforting scent of sawdust and old paper. Half-finished wooden models sat on shelves, intricate and beautiful. It was the space of a creator, a space of organized chaos that was somehow more calming than my own sterile order. I helped him to a worn leather couch, and he sank into it with a grateful sigh. Thanks, Leo, he murmured, his eyes closed. I really thank you. Don't worry about it, I said, my voice still feeling alien to me. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, my hands shoved in my pockets. You need anything? Ice. Water. Ice would be great. Freezer. He gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. I moved through his space like a trespasser. I found a bag of frozen peas and wrapped it in a dish towel, my hands clumsy. When I returned, he was trying to prop his foot up on the coffee table, his face contorted in pain. I knelt down without a word, gently taking his leg and lifting it onto a pillow I'd grabbed from a nearby chair. My fingers brushed against the warm skin of his calf, and a jolt went through me, sharp and startling. I pulled my hand back as if I'd been burned. He didn't seem to notice. He just leaned his head back against the cushions, his eyes still closed. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the rain still drumming against the window panes. I was trapped in this bubble of forced intimacy, breathing in the air he breathed, surrounded by the evidence of his life. The silence stretched, thick and charged. I should have been terrified. A part of me was. But another, deeper part of me felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of calm. The storm was raging outside his windows, but in here, in the warm, sawdust-scented chaos of his life, it was quiet. It was safe. I stayed. I told myself it was because he couldn't get up, because it was the decent thing to do. But I knew it was a lie. I stayed because I couldn't bring myself to leave. I ordered a pizza from a place down the street, and we ate it in near silence, the television murmuring a generic sitcom in the background. The awkwardness was a physical presence in the room, a third person sitting on the couch between us. I was so aware of him, of the way he shifted his weight, the low groan he made when his ankle throbbed, the way his eyes looked dark and tired in the dim light of the lamp. I found myself watching his hands as he ate. They were large, capable hands, with clean, short fingernails and a few faint scars crisscrossing the knuckles. These were hands that drew plans for buildings, that shaped wood, that could palm a basketball with effortless ease. I imagined them holding a pencil, the graphite whispering across the paper. I imagined them gripping a piece of sandpaper, smoothing a rough edge. The fantasy was so vivid, so specific, that I had to look away, my face growing hot. After we ate, I cleaned up the pizza box and the paper plates, moving around his small kitchen with a strange sense of purpose. It felt domestic. It felt dangerous. When I came back to the living room, he had his head tilted back on the couch again, his expression tight with discomfort. "The pain meds are in the bathroom cabinet," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "Could you?" Of course. His bathroom was as lived in as the rest of the apartment. A damp towel hung over the shower rod. A razor sat by the sink. The air smelled of his soap and shaving cream, a scent so quintessentially him that it made my chest ache. I found the bottle of ibuprofen in a glass, my reflection in the mirror looking pale and startled. "What are you doing here, Leo?" the face seemed to ask. I handed him the pills and the water, my fingers brushing against his. This time the contact lingered for a fraction of a second too long. A spark. A question. I saw something flicker in his eyes before he looked down, swallowing the pills. Was it just the pain? Or was it something else? My mind, always eager to build narratives out of thin air, began to spin. "You really don't have to stay," he said quietly, placing the empty glass on the floor beside the couch. "I can manage from here." "It's fine," I insisted, my voice softer than I intended. "The rain's pretty bad anyway." It was a flimsy excuse, and we both knew it. He didn't argue. He just nodded, a small, tired movement. We sat in silence again, the sitcom having given way to a quiet, atmospheric movie about space. The only light came from the screen, casting shifting blue and white shadows across the room, across his face. The initial awkwardness began to melt away, replaced by a strange, comfortable quiet. It was the kind of quiet that usually took months, or even years, to build with someone. After a while, his breathing deepened, becoming slow and even. I thought he had fallen asleep. The tension in my shoulders eased slightly. I could just be here. I could watch over him without the pressure of conversation, without the fear of saying the wrong thing. I let myself look at him, really look at him, in the dim, flickering light. The hard lines of his face were softened in sleep. A stray lock of hair had fallen across his forehead. He looked younger, more vulnerable. The architect, the athlete, the unattainable man, had receded, leaving just Marcus. He shivered, a small, involuntary tremor. His sweatshirt was still damp from the rain. Acting on an impulse I didn't understand, I stood up and found a thick wool blanket draped over the back of his drafting chair. It smelled faintly of him, of wood smoke and cedar. I unfolded it carefully and gently laid it over him. As I tucked it around his shoulders, my hand brushed against the side of his neck. His skin was warm, alive. A faint stubble rasped against my fingertips. His eyes fluttered open. I froze, my hand still hovering near his face. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. He wasn't asleep. He had never been asleep. His gaze was clear and steady, and in the dim blue light from the television, I couldn't read his expression. There was no anger, no confusion, just a quiet, intense watchfulness. "Leo," he said, and his voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floor, through the soles of my feet, straight into my chest. It wasn't a question. It was just my name. A statement. An acknowledgement of my presence, of my hand near his face, of the charged space between us. This was the point of no return. I knew it with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating. My entire ordered life had led to this single, chaotic, unpredictable moment. I could pull back. I could apologize, make an excuse, and flee back to the safety of my fortress, leaving its walls higher and thicker than ever before. Or I could stay. I could lean into the chaos. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken words. The sound of the rain, the low hum of the movie, it all faded away until the only thing I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. His eyes never left mine. There was a question in them, a deep, quiet inquiry that I felt more than I saw. He wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just watching me, giving me the choice. I slowly, tentatively, lowered my hand from his neck to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath my palm, the light rasp of his stubble a thrilling, grounding texture. He didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into my touch, just a fraction of an inch, a silent surrender. A silent invitation. That was all it took. The last of my carefully constructed defenses crumbled to dust. I leaned down, my movements feeling agonizingly slow, as if I were moving through water. I could feel his breath on my lips, warm and smelling faintly of pizza and something uniquely him. I watched his eyes flutter shut. And then I kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or frantic desire. It was a question asked in the softest possible language. It was tentative, gentle, a bare press of lips against lips. It was a confession of every stolen glance across the basketball court, every hoarded memory of his voice, every secret ache I had nurtured in the silence of my apartment. For a second, nothing happened. He was perfectly still, and a cold wave of panic crashed over me. I had misread everything. I had ruined it all. I started to pull back, my mind screaming with regret, but then his hand came up, his fingers tangling in the hair at the back of my neck. He didn't pull me closer, not forcefully. He just held me there, a steady, grounding pressure that said, "Stay. Don't go." He shifted his head slightly, and his lips parted, deepening the kiss. And my world exploded. It was no longer a question. It was an answer. It was a slow, deep, and unbelievably certain kiss that spoke of a longing that mirrored my own. It was the taste of him, the warmth of him, the solid, real presence of him that I had only ever allowed myself to dream about. My internal world, usually a cacophony of anxious thoughts, went utterly, blissfully silent. There was no analysis, no overthinking. There was only this. Only him. The feeling of his hand in my hair, the soft pressure of his lips, the quiet sigh that escaped him and was caught by my own mouth. My ordered life was over. The fortress was a ruin. And standing there in the rubble, I had never felt so completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully free. The museum glass had not just shattered. It had melted away, and the art was no longer something to be admired from a distance. It was real, it was warm, and it was kissing me back in the blue, flickering light of a forgotten movie. The morning after was a landscape of harsh light and colder silence. I woke up on the couch, a crick in my neck, the wool blanket tangled around my legs. For a disorienting moment, I didn't know where I was. Then the memory of the night before rushed back in, a tidal wave of warmth and panic. The kiss, his hand in my hair, the way we had broken apart, breathless, and simply looked at each other for a long moment before he had finally, truly, fallen asleep. I had stayed. I had slept on his couch, listening to his soft breathing from the bedroom, the door left slightly ajar. Now, in the unforgiving gray light of dawn, it all felt like a dream. A dangerous, beautiful dream. The apartment was quiet. I could hear the faint drip of the coffee maker from the kitchen. My anxiety, which had been so blessedly silent the night before, returned with a vengeance. It coiled in my stomach, a cold, venomous snake. What had I done? I had taken advantage of him. He was injured, on painkillers, vulnerable. I had projected all my secret fantasies onto a moment of kindness and weakness. He would wake up full of regret. He would be disgusted. Or worse, he would be pitying. The easy friendship we had, the simple camaraderie of the team, was gone. I had burned it to the ground for a single, selfish moment. The silence from the bedroom felt accusatory. I slipped off the couch, my movements quiet and furtive, like a thief. I had to get out of there before he woke up. I could leave a note, a simple, "Hope your ankle feels better," and then I could disappear. I would quit the team. I would move to another city. My mind raced, building escape plans, constructing new walls from the rubble of the old ones. I was halfway to the door, my shoes in my hand, when his voice cut through the silence. "Leo?" I froze, my back to him. The voice came from the kitchen. It was low and rough with sleep, and it sent a fresh wave of dread through me. I turned around slowly. He was standing there, leaning heavily on the counter. He was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants and a rumpled t-shirt. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were shadowed with fatigue. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring intently at the coffee dripping into the pot. "Morning," I managed to say. My voice was a croak. "Coffee's almost ready," he said. His tone was flat, neutral. It was the voice of a polite stranger, not the man I had kissed hours earlier. The cold snake in my stomach twisted itself into a tighter knot. This was it. This was the regret. The distance was a chasm between us, wider and more impassable than the few feet of wooden floor. He poured coffee into 2 mugs, his movements slow and careful because of his ankle. He pushed one across the counter toward me without meeting my eyes. "Cream and sugar are on the counter." I took the mug, my hand trembling slightly. The warmth of the ceramic did nothing to chase the chill from my bones. We stood there in a thick, suffocating silence, sipping our coffee. Every tick of the clock on the wall was like a hammer blow. My mind was screaming. Say something. Apologize. Explain. Run. About last night. I started, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I shouldn't have," he said at the same exact moment, finally looking up at me. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tight. My heart plummeted. Of course. He shouldn't have. He regretted it. "No, it was my fault," I said quickly, rushing to take the blame, to make it easier for him. "You were in pain, and I misread. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I never should have. I've ruined things. I'll just go." I put the mug down and turned to leave, a profound, hollow ache spreading through my chest. I had been right. It was all a mistake. My mistake. "Leo, wait." His voice was sharp, insistent. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I couldn't make myself turn around. I couldn't bear to see the pity on his face. "That's not what I meant," he said quietly, his voice closer now. I realized he had hobbled away from the counter, closing some of the distance between us. "When I said I shouldn't have, I meant I shouldn't have waited so long. I shouldn't have let you think you were the only 1 inch." The world stopped spinning. I turned around slowly, my mind struggling to process his words. He was standing only a few feet away, leaning against the back of the couch for support. His eyes were fixed on me, and for the first time that morning, they were clear. The guarded, neutral expression was gone, replaced by a raw, uncertain vulnerability that mirrored my own. "What?" The word was a breath, a whisper. He let out a long, slow sigh. "I'm not good at this, Leo. I build things. I draw lines. I'm not good with this," he gestured vaguely between us. "I saw you watching me. At practice, in the locker room. For months. I thought maybe I was imagining it. And I told myself it didn't matter, because I had my own lines drawn. The ones that said who I was supposed to be." He paused, running a hand through his messy hair. "Sarah, we broke up 6 months ago. It was amicable. We just wanted different things. I just never corrected anyone. It was easier to let people think things were the same. Simpler." My mind reeled. The shatterproof glass I had placed between us, the entire narrative of his unattainable straightness. I had built it myself. It was a fabrication born of my own fear. "Last night," he continued, his voice dropping lower, "when I hurt my ankle, you were the only one who stayed. And when you were helping me up the stairs, when I was leaning on you, all those lines I'd drawn just seemed so stupid, so pointless. And when you touched my face," he shook his head, a small, incredulous smile touching his lips. "I've been wanting that to happen for a very long time." The relief that washed over me was so total, so profound, it almost brought me to my knees. The cold knot of anxiety in my stomach didn't just unwind, it dissolved into nothing. All the overthinking, all the fear, all the self-recrimination, it was all just noise. The truth was this man, standing in front of me, looking at me with the same terrifying hope that I felt blooming in my own chest. I thought I was just some project you were being nice to. I confessed, my voice thick with emotion. The injured teammate. You're not a project, Leo, he said softly. He pushed himself off the couch and took 1, 2, careful, limping steps toward me until he was standing right in front of me. He was so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. He reached out, not to my face, but to my hand, his fingers closing around mine. His touch was warm and sure. I was just scared. I think maybe we both were. And he was right. I had been so convinced he was the masterpiece behind the glass that I never considered he might have been looking back at me, just as uncertain, just as afraid. I finally let myself breathe. I've been admiring you from afar for so long, I admitted, the words feeling freeing. I felt like I was breaking every rule just by driving you home. A genuine smile finally broke across his face, and it was like the sun coming out after a week of rain. Good, he said. I'm tired of rules. He leaned in, and this time, there was no hesitation. There was no tentativeness. The second kiss was nothing like the first. It was not a question. It was a statement. It was deep and sure, a confirmation of everything that had just been said. It was the taste of coffee and relief and the promise of a morning that was not an ending, but a beginning. It felt like coming home to a place I had never known existed. The days that followed were a delicate, tentative navigation of a new world. We existed in a quiet bubble, just the two of us. I stayed with him for the next few days, using his ridiculously slow internet to work from his couch while he elevated his ankle and sketched in a notebook. We learned the rhythms of each other's silence. I learned that he hummed, a low, tuneless sound, when he was concentrating. He learned that I needed 2 full cups of coffee before I could form a coherent sentence. It was an intimacy built on small things. The way he'd pass me a section of the newspaper without a word. The way I'd get up to refill his water glass before he had to ask. We talked for hours, filling in the vast, empty spaces where our assumptions about each other used to be. I told him about my sterile, ordered life, my fear of chaos. He told me about the immense pressure he felt to follow a pre-drawn blueprint for his life, and his growing desire to design something of his own. Our first official date was a week later, when he could finally put some weight on his foot. He took me to a small, quiet restaurant tucked away on a side street I had never noticed before. It was simple. It was perfect. Over dinner, he reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb stroking over my knuckles. It was a public gesture, small but significant. It was a declaration that we were no longer hiding, not even from ourselves. We fell into a routine that felt nothing like the rigid schedules I used to build for myself. It was a routine of comfort and discovery. Tuesday nights were still for basketball, though now he sat on the bench, shouting encouragement and critiques. Afterwards, we'd go back to his place, or mine. He brought a beautiful, chaotic warmth to my minimalist apartment, leaving a coffee mug on the wrong coaster, draping his jacket over my perfectly arranged chair. I found I didn't mind. The breaches in my fortress walls were letting the light in. One evening, a few weeks later, we were lying on his couch, a movie playing that neither of us was watching. The rain was falling outside, a soft, steady rhythm against the glass, a gentle echo of that first, fateful night. I was resting my head on his chest, feeling the slow, steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. It was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. He shifted slightly, his arm tightening around me. "You know," he said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. "That night on the court, when I went down, for a second, just before I landed, I saw you. You were on the sideline, watching." I lifted my head to look at him. "I'm always watching you." A soft smile played on his lips. "I know, and I think, maybe, a part of me fell on purpose. Not to get hurt, but just to see if you would be the one to stay." He paused, his expression turning serious. "That's a stupid thing to say, right?" "No," I said, my voice thick. "It's not stupid at all." I leaned in and kissed him, a slow, deep kiss full of a gratitude so immense it felt like it could fill the entire room. My life was no longer a fortress. It was an open space, a landscape in the process of being redesigned. The walls had come down, not with a violent crash, but piece by piece, dismantled by a pair of large, capable hands. There was still fear, a lingering echo of the man who hid behind routine. But now, it was outweighed by a profound, breathtaking hope. I had spent so long admiring a masterpiece from a distance, terrified of getting too close, only to discover that the real art was not in the observation, but in the connection. It was in the shared silence, the easy laughter, the steady, reassuring warmth of the man who had stumbled into my life and redesigned it from the inside out.